So you said you started your own business. What kind of business?
Yeah. The original one. Should we backtrack?
Yeah, let's backtrack.
So,
Full story.
the reason that I'm in a similar industry to you guys, almost the exact one now, is because my first like big boy job, I'd call it, was selling advertising. So I used to sell advertising for what at the time was called Grand Slam Sports. It was St. Louis Sports Magazine and KFNS Radio. And during that time period, I kind of figured out that that was even a thing. I didn't know what marketing was, but I've always looked at commercials the same way the cable guy looks at television. It's just everything was commercialized for me. And it was prevalent in my childhood, and it was a big part of just like who I was. So when I had the chance to go sell it, it was really exciting, and I got to do innovative things because I didn't know the industry. I was thinking outside the box, but just by pure dumb luck. It wasn't that I came in as some like savant. It was just like, oh, why don't we do this way? And they're like, that's not how we do things. Try it, And so I found some success there.
Like doing what, for instance?
So I would say like my first sale, I have two good relevant stories, I would say, about that. And my first one was I wanted to go after big dogs when I first came into the industry. I'm like, why aren't we calling like Reebok and Gatorade and Under Armour for this magazine? They're like, go for it, kid. Like,
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And Reebok called me back, and the dude really politely explained to me, because he was like, what are you looking to do here? And I was like, well, I want to get your ad in the magazine. He's like, well, what's your magazine? I told him. He's like, well, it's a syndication. He's like, it's a free magazine that you pick up. And he was like, okay. And he's like, so you're looking for us to sponsor your magazine? I go, no. Looking for you to buy an ad. And he politely explained to me that Reebok does more for your magazine than your magazine does for Reebok. He goes, so what you're asking for is a sponsorship, just so you know. I go, okay. And he goes, so how much is it to sponsor a full page ad? And I was like $1,500 or whatever it was. He was like, all right, I'll do 4 months, tenacity kind of. And I was like, cool, rock on.
Sweet.
And then, dabs all around the office for
Getting Reebok.
the idiot new kid who's like, oh. And then the secondary, and where I really found my niche, and this is how I ended up going into my own business, was I wanted to land some cool, like, I always thought of like the Mad Men days of advertising as like the premier. That's why I wanted to get into advertising, not to be a chauvinist or to do nylon ads, but just because of like sitting people down in a room and like solving a problem. Like, how do we deliver this message to the public? And so Bentley of St. Louis is down in the Valley. And I was like, I want to go after them because I would love to just test drive a car, just sit in one, like 23 years old or whatever I was. I was like, I just want to sit in a Lambo. And so I went down there, and they were like, sure, like, what's your pitch? And I was like, ooh, a pitch? I don't know. So I went back, and I put a suit on, and I took a photo holding the hockey stick, and I did different positions, like, like one of me standing, one of me squatting. And then I had I was driving a Chevy Malibu at the time. And so I took the car and I mirrored it twice, and then had ice on the bottom. And it was 3 of me in front of a Malibu. And it said Bentley St. Louis, smooth as ice. And then I went back and I showed them that. And I was like, but this is your cars and 3 blues players. And they were like, love that idea. And I was like how I did that. And so I kind of started doing that. Like Pickleman's Deli, who has a mascot now, they came up with.
The pickle?
Yeah. May or may not have been pitched by me at some point.
Okay.
And I was told that it was too expensive and it was too whatever. And I went in with the painting. So the painting is still down at the SLU location. I made this painting of Pickleback, this music group. And I had a whole backstory. Gary Pickleman was the lead singer.
Like Nickelback with the pickle version.
Right.
Okay.
And he just lived in a town. He was a cucumber, and he lived in a town with a bunch of other cucumbers. And then like, he was always getting into things. And they're like, oh, you really got yourself into a pickle now, Gary. And he left town. He was sad and somber. He fell into a vat of brine. He became a pickle, and he came back, and everybody's like, damn, Gary, like, looking good. And he's like, yeah, it's like, whatever, And so he started a band, and it was Francis Dill, Steve Gherkin, Gary Pickleman, and Rob Sauer, I think. And so I took this painting and this backstory, and I was working with just 2 other locations at the time, and I pitched it to their corporate. hope I don't get you guys canceled or myself. Like, Pickleman's gonna come after us. A big lawsuit. And I was like, hey, and then the dude that worked at corporate at the time was like, just so you know, we've been kicking around the idea of a mascot for about 2 or 3 years. And I'm like, well, just so you know, this one is ready to rock. Like this could be the next California raisins.
Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pickleback.
Yeah.
Pickleback.
Yeah. Like, I don't know if what is their songs? What was the one that was like, was it a picture?
Yeah.
Photograph.
Photograph. Yeah. So they were like, nah, not really. And so I did this sample video, and to this day, like if you go into one of the locations, I'll leave that to the listeners and watchers to figure it out. But it's 25 or 26,000 views versus like their next highest one being like 800 views. I remember at the time they're like, do you think this is worth X amount of dollars? And I'm like, yeah. And I was like, whatever your reaction or interactions are on it, like I could do your social media too if you want to pay me extra for that. They didn't like that. And then when I was out of town, the dude from corporate I had an assistant at the time because I just kind of started kicking this off my company, and he just talked to her all rude. So I called him and I'm like, hey, we're not going to do business anymore. Like, are you sure you don't want to rethink that? Because I was getting ready to do like all 18 locations at the time. And I'm like, yeah, positive. I don't want to do that. So that was the end of that. But that was the very beginning of Inside the Circle, which was my first company. So early on, I knew right away that my relationships it was relationships over money, right? Like, who can I work with long term? And how I got into that was we had fire sales at the radio station where you could buy a 30-second ad for $5 or a 60-second ad for like $10. And I was like, can I buy these? And they're like, yeah, I guess. Like, why would you want to? And I knew that if we were doing it, other channels were probably doing it. And so I went around to other channels. Like at the time, it was like Emmis and Clear Channel, no iHeart or Hubbard yet. And I just bought inventory for like 2 years. Then like year 3, I went out, all the people that were like, oh, your station doesn't fit my demo. And I was like, how about this station? So I could sell it at a 20, 30% markup, and I get a 20% kickback from the stations as an agency. So I'm making 50% margins on these things and still selling them cheaper than what you'd get anywhere else because it doesn't expire. So that's how I started Inside the Circle. It's through radio. Then got into, because of 2 great mentors, television and print ads and 9 yards here in St. Louis.
It's awesome.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So how long did you do Inside?
Up until the pandemic.
Okay.
So on and off. There was times in there where like I didn't know what SEO marketing was or like search engine optimization. It was like new thing at some point. And so rather than like switching gears, I had to figure out how to do it. Probably my biggest weakness was also being a yes man at the time. Like, yeah, we can do that. And then stretch myself way too thin. But the SEO stuff, I went and applied and got a job at YP, just Yellow Pages Online. And I went through their training program, which was like 5 weeks. And so rather than going back to school to learn this, I got paid $9 an hour to learn it. Like, all right, you ready to go on the floor? Actually, I'm ready to go back to my business. And so I just went back and used what I learned.
Thanks for paying and teaching me at the same time.
And thanks for paying to teach me. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's another prominent company that I'm still have a great relationship with here in St. Louis that does social media stuff. And it's funny because I told them that story in the interview. Still got offered the job. And I worked with them for like 6 months to learn their ways. And I just took that knowledge back. So there was dips and doozles, but we'll get into the mentorship thing later. But that was really the key. It's like finding someone to guide me.
Yeah.
It's saved me from a lot of pitfalls. But
I've experienced something very similar in my business. Like if I
Same.
wouldn't have had the mentor that I had, then I would be where I'm at today.
And failure is like the best learner, right? So like
for
I
sure.
think we talked about this the other day is like, it's not about winning and losing. It's winning and learning. And if that's your mentality, then that failure wasn't really a failure. That was a chance to get better. So I always tried to bounce back better.
Thomas, and I didn't fail 10,000 times. I just learned 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb.
Yeah.
Yeah. So started all this, and then when did Punchline kick off?